All right. Well, welcome to another bright news discussion. I'm here with Shane Kennedy. So,
What's going,
Shane,
Shannon?
how you doing? I'm
Doing great.
all right. I'm good, bro. You know, glad to be on here again and have another discussion. So today we're going to talk about something a little interesting. You've actually been reading a book recently, and I wanted to start out by getting your take on that book and what the book is about.
So here I'll start off by showing the book. I've got it right here. It's
Okay.
called Pagan America:
Yeah.
The Decline of Christianity in the Dark Age to Come, and it's
Mm,
written by this guy named John Daniel Davidson, and he is kind of he's kind of like what I would like to call a retail academic, where he's not in the world of academia, but he is doing the same thing a lot of academics do, where he criticizes bodies of knowledge and kind of looks at what all the latest discoveries and insights are, and he kind of distills them and summarizes them into works. And the place that he works still to this day is for the Federalist, which is a conservative publication,
okay.
um, which they've been around for a while, and I think he's been with them for quite a while. In fact, I think he may be a writer and an editor, but I'm not entirely sure about that.
Okay.
So basically, what the thesis of his book is that we have civilizations have one of two paths that they can take. One is the pagan path, and the other is the Christian path,
Mm,
and that's really about it.
okay.
There's not a whole lot of wiggle room, and what he argues is that you had great pagan civilizations in the past, and those great powerful pagan civilizations were grounded in a in in a in a relational society that's built upon the premise that the strong not only have the right to subjugate the weak, but the strong have a responsibility to subjugate the weak.
Mm, mm,
And and there are a lot of corollaries and implications of that um way of viewing the world. But then
yeah.
he argues that then there's the contrasting perspective, which is the Christian point of view, which we could call it maybe the gospel path or something like that. And that one is built upon the premise that the heart and soul of society is built on, or the heart and soul of civilization is built on the strong having mercy for the weak.
Mm, mm,
You
mm,
know, on this orientation of where ultimately, rather than power being the fundamental uh um kind of a center of society, from the Christian perspective, it's love, which
okay.
which is willing the good of the other, as Thomas Aquinas would say.
Right. And
And so,
like caritas, like the Greek, like charity.
yep.
Okay. Okay. And so would um uh just to run, what was his name again? Sorry.
John Daniel Davidson.
Okay. And so would Davidson say that the world we're living in currently, or the sort of society that we're sort of slowly maybe returning to, is more pagan than we actually like to admit? Do you think?
Yeah, so what he would argue, now granted, I'm not finished with the book yet, so and I'm not an authority on him.
Sure.
But I think what he would argue is that that the West in general is currently a civilization that's transitioning from Christianity being its being
Foundation
the
for.
yeah
Yeah.
the very foundation, the very center of it.
Mhm.
We're transitioning back to paganism, and
Right.
that we are currently somewhere in the middle between that we're currently in the middle between Christianity and paganism, and the momentum is moving away from Christianity and toward paganism.
Right. And so why would he why okay, maybe it's not even why would he, because there have been other, you know, scholars that we know of that has sort of alluded to this or made have made an awareness of this. Um, I guess, in other words, um, you know, our world, you know, the world we live in today, and the way we think about things, has not totally been has not totally reverted to a pagan worldview, right? Uh, because of course, you know, Christianity has sort of um, Western society has been imbued with the Christian
Mhm.
message, right? Um, you know, in particular, a deep concern um, for victims, right?
Mm.
And I'll just I'll just you know, read a quote here by 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 Rene Girard, uh, where he said, and of course he's another, you know, uh, thinker who talks about anthropology and the effects of Christianity. But um, this is what he says about, you know, about victims and paganism. It says, and I quote, this is from Goodreads. It says the most powerful anti-Christian movement is the one that takes over and radicalizes the concern for victims in order to paganize it. The
Mm.
powers and the principalities want to be revolutionary now, and they reproach Christianity for not defending victims with enough ardor. In Christian history, they see nothing but persecutions, acts of oppression, inquisitions. So, in other words, when I read that, it sounds to me like what he's saying is people who are anti-Christian, what they want is they want the Christian concern for victims without Christianity being in the picture,
Right.
without Christianity, you know, without I guess what would you say? Without giving Christianity its due credit, you know, or due acknowledgement, you know. Um so in other words, you might say um they don't want uh they don't want, say, warfare, or they don't want violence, but they do believe in accusation. They do believe in scapegoating. They'll say, well, you know, these people have been oppressed for such a long time. Somebody needs to be held accountable for that, right? Um,
And that's the scapegoat mechanism, right?
yeah, that's the scapegoat mechanism,
And
right? Yeah,
and we can even argue that's kind of how pagan civilizations kind of got started, right?
right, right. Yeah, yeah. If you you know, like if you think about the Romans, right, which is sort of our um archetypal pagan civilization, you know, of course, for the West,
Mhm.
right? We would say that's sort of our historical political foundations. That's our, you know, our inheritance from the ancient world, you know, or
Mhm.
something like that. And but you know, the thing I think that is different about the sort of ancient world and say the one that we're living in, which has pagan attributes, is that the Roman world, you know, victims would not have been considered. Um, there wouldn't have been a concern for that. You know what I mean? There wouldn't have been a
Well,
concern.
and
Yeah,
yeah, and the right thing to do would be to castigate the victim.
right.
You know, if you have a deformed baby, the
Yeah,
right thing to do would be to to expose it, or kick it off a cliff, or
Mhm.
leave it on the side of the road.
Right, right.
You
So,
know, like that
yeah,
that was considered the right thing to do. The wrong thing to do from their point of view was to take the baby in and take care of the baby in spite of it being deformed.
right.
And the early Christians would go and take in the deformed and lame babies that nobody wanted. And
Mhm,
to the Roman mind and conscience, that was just completely backwards and absurd.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. I mean,
You know,
I
so
guess,
so
yeah,
to pagan sensibilities, you know, that authentic concern for victims, it doesn't make any sense.
right,
They would say, "Oh, those people are crazy."
right, right. Now, on the flip side of that, though, what would you say the West sort of, I guess you might you might say it's a hyper awareness of the victim, right? Um, so, you know, I guess the thing I guess I would ask is in our society, who would truly, okay, okay. Hmm. I'm trying to,
I've got two examples in mind.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
so one, think about abortion, right?
okay, yeah.
So the fundamental argument, back in the 90s and in the 80s and stuff, which I wasn't aware in the 80s.
Mhm,
So the argument that I was aware of in the 90s was that abortion ought to be legal, and that it should be safe, legal, and rare. You
mhm,
know, the whole idea was that you gotta that you need that it's merciful to keep it available for very, very slim circumstances.
mhm,
But now that is, that's considered too right wing and too conservative a point of view.
mhm,
Now, even people that would chant that back in the 90s would say that it should be legal all the way up to birth, and even for a little window after birth, which is insane.
right.
Um, so the thing is, the whole premise of the abortion argument now is the woman is stronger and the fetus is weaker.
Mhm,
Therefore, the stronger has a right to unalive the weak.
mhm, mhm.
Basically, if the weak can't fight back, then they don't have any rights.
Right,
That's the pagan mindset. That's the pagan line of reasoning. And then
right.
and then another one. Remember back during the COVID era, which is very recent.
Mhm,
Um, if you remember, I'm going to be very careful in the way I say this.
mhm,
Uh, there was a time when the followers of the I guess we could call them like the followers of Fauci or something,
mhm,
were legit were saying, and there were a lot of them that were saying that if somebody refused to take the jab, that they should be refused medical um services, that they should be refused medical treatment.
mhm, mhm,
um and there were a lot of people callously saying that, many of them.
mhm,
um and that was when you get down to the core of that line of reasoning, that was saying, well, if they're not willing to be a part of my tribe, of
mhm.
my ideological tribe,
Mhm.
then just let them be unalived.
Right.
you know
Right. Yeah. That now the thing about that is that I guess the question would be is that still a concern for the victim? You know what I mean? Like okay, I guess maybe you could say there's a different victim that they have concern for, right? Um you might say, well, the people that aren't getting the jab
Mhm.
are are willfully harming other people or putting other people at risk. So we need to care for the people that actually are complying because they are part of the group, right? They are the ones who are doing the right thing, so to speak,
Mhm.
right?
But at the same time, those people would reject the idea that diabetics should be denied medical treatment.
Mhm,
Because remember, the way that most people get type 2 diabetes is because they're not properly following they're not following a healthy diet.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm not saying that to cascade blame on anybody. I've got family members that have type 2 diabetes, and if somebody were to try to deny them medical treatment, I would not accept that, you
Yeah.
know. And also too, the fact that our government has given us, from the time we were little, very, very poor dietary guidelines,
Mm-hmm.
telling us that we should be eating the biggest food group that we should be consuming each day are breads and pastas and
Mm-hmm.
potatoes,
Mm-hmm.
and that I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
So the thing is, denying somebody medical treatment because they're not following what your idea of the good is, or what your idea of the right is,
Mm-hmm.
that's subscribing to a tribal and exclusive framework of morality.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, I know I just made that sound kind of abstract. I'll walk it back a little bit. Christianity says that morality is universal,
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't matter if someone's a Christian or not.
Mm-hmm.
You still treat them as if they were a Christian. The
Mm-hmm.
same charity and the same moral obligations that you would have to a fellow Christian, you also have to the non-Christian.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the thing is, that is a very, very that's a very unique uh framework for morality, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's the thing. Every other group, and it doesn't matter, the other people that are the people that are in the other Abrahamic faiths,
Mm-hmm.
they have maybe like a hybrid version of that, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't totally universalize morality the
Right.
way that Christians do. and
Yeah.
and so now when you look at America, we extend morality based upon our ideological tribes,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the reason that people who are traditionally left wing in America, who would rightfully advocate against police brutality, and rightfully advocate against throwing people in prison, for instance, that were guilty of nothing other than just possessing a substance.
Mm-hmm.
They had committed no actual crime. They would just be thrown in prison for something stupid like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're totally fine with weaponizing the justice system against their rival presidential candidate. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The so I guess what I'm trying to think here is that why do you think certain forms of victimization are are okay to be aware of um and protest against, and then there's others that are not, right? Like there's things that we how would I describe it? It's like, okay, well, for instance, we don't consider a woman who wants to get rid of a child as
Mhm.
um as a scapegoat mechanism, or as sort of a sacrificial mechanism, right? Because when you know the way I would allude to the whole idea of abortion, in ancient times, a woman or a family, if they said, okay, we're gonna give our child to the gods or something like that, right?
You're just gonna get rid of them. I don't like the way I don't like the way they look. I'm just gonna go throw them off a cliff.
Yeah, right.
In the pagan
And,
world, that's fine.
right. and
There's
and
nothing wrong
so
with that.
you could, I guess, in a way, make the same sort of claim about someone who would do that today. They might say, well, I can't take care of a child, from a financial or economic point of view, right?
Mhm.
I don't want to deal with the stigma or the shame of having a child that I can't take care of, or I'm not of the age, that I can really take care of a child right now. You know what I mean? Like I'm just a teenager, or I'm just not even a teenager, but like I'm a young adult, and I just don't have time for that. Like I have a lot of things going on in my mind that, I want a career. Like I want to be somebody. Like I want to have a good life. I don't want to be subjected to having to, you know, um, nurture a child for however long. You know, um, I think that's the way that people who are who are pro-abortionist would think. They would say, well, who's the real victim? Well, the real victim is the mother, because she's the one that has to take care of the child. She's the one that's alive right now, living in a world that is, that won't cater to her as far as her being a mother, right? So she's really the victim here. She's really the one that is um, going to carry the burden, not the child, right?
Mhm.
So does that make sense what I'm trying to say there?
Yeah,
As far as like who's the real
so
victim?
to legitimize it, she tries to put on the accoutrement of
Hmm.
being a victim, right?
Hmm.
So she has legitimacy because we still live in a society where at least we are where it is still surface level Christian,
Hmm.
and but before we started talking, you mentioned Tom Holland, not the actor,
Hmm.
and people like him who would talk about who would uh pin the origins of all the woke stuff and everything on kind of a demythologized materialistic Christian worldview. But the problem is that the trajectory with that is to de-sanctify it and to remove the
Hmm.
spiritual component of it. And the more
Hmm.
and the more you do that, you end up, once you remove the vestiges of Christianity from the system, you're left with nothing other than just paganism.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
and then at that point, this necessity to portray the necessity of the strong victimizer to portray themselves as being the victim in order to be legit, in order to gain legitimacy in scapegoating the victim.
Hmm.
uh it'll probably just morph into linguistic terminology,
Hmm. Okay.
that's disassociated from reality, and that's really that's disassociated from any kind of necessity,
Right.
where if that
Yeah.
makes any sense.
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess okay, what I want to turn then from is from that sort of hyper concern or whatever for the victim, or linguistic, you
But
know.
let me say one more thing, is that the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche saw
Mhm.
the writing on the wall with everything, and that's where he was saying that as the Christian order uh where wears away and is eroded and is eroded away at in the West, um that the importance of the power of the will
Mhm.
will become center stage,
Mhm.
where this whole notion of doing away with this universal morality and everything that Nietzsche would say is kind of bunk,
Mhm.
and what he would argue is we need to move into a moral framework that says whoever's will is superior, whoever is stronger, can and must subjugate the weak. And there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with that. In fact, what he would say, just like the pagans, the Romans, Babylonians, Greeks, everybody
Mhm.
um that would agree with him, that's perfectly fine. That's not only fine, but that's the natural and correct order of things.
Right.
And
Right.
further, what I would say is, if you're coming to it from the point of view that natural selection is the mechanism by which life has come into being,
Mhm.
which is which I think is absurd. But
Mhm.
if that's the point of view that you approach things from, then the supremacy of the will and this notion that the strong have a right and responsibility to subjugate the weak, I think in that from that point of view, I think it only makes sense, because
Right.
that's essentially what natural selection is, isn't it? It's the
Mhm.
strong subjugating the weak, not allowing the weak to breed, and the strong outbreeding the weak, and
Mhm,
the strong killing off the weak, eating them as food and stuff.
mhm, mhm,
Um, in many ways, I think natural selection is a way of, or the theory of natural selection is a way of justifying the repaganizing of the West.
mm. Okay. And so now let's turn to this whole the whole idea in which that sort of manifests itself, right? So in other words, I mean, we've talked about the whole idea of you know being pro-abortionist, or you know what happened with COVID and everything, right?
Mhm.
But there's also, I think, other ways in which paganism manifests itself from a much more religious perspective, right?
Mhm.
And that is, or a much more culturally religious perspective, right? Which is that a lot of people in the West are looking for a way to return to sort of some sort of ancestral or
Mhm.
ancient religious tradition. You know, uh, in other words, a pre-Christian
Yeah.
idea of religion, right? So they want to go down to South America and do ayahuasca, right?
Mhm.
And dance with the Yanomami tribe. You know what I mean? They want to go. They want to go to West Africa, or maybe somewhere closer. They want to go to Cuba, or Puerto Rico, or I don't know, New Orleans or something like that, and they want to get into Santeria, and
Go to the grave of the voodoo queen.
yeah, you know what I mean, and say, oh, our ancestors had a great religion, we need to return to that, right? Or the woman say, well, I want to go back to, I don't know, Scandinavia, or some, or the British Isles, and be a part of the Celtic, or
Mhm.
the deeply spiritual Viking faith of Odin, and Thor, and Balder, and you know and that's what really matters. That's what really, we left our ancestral religions, and that's why everything is so chaotic. And we chose Christianity, and look what that did to us. So we need to return to sort of this religious fervor of the past, right? Now, I guess my perspective on that is this: is that Christianity has already sort of weakened that enterprise, right? It has already weakened that enterprise, because those religions, as we have previously talked about, really didn't, really didn't have a concern for victims, right? Or didn't have a concern for people that were seen as weaker, like the lame, or like with the Romans, somebody who says, well, I'm tired of my life. I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna, liquidate myself.
Mhm.
The Romans might have said, well, do it. You know what I mean? Why are you wasting so much time
Yeah.
in the public square talking about that? Just
Just go for it.
save us the energy. Don't shame yourself even further by by rhetoric and hyperbole and all these things. If you mean what you say, and say what you mean, kind of
Mhm.
thing, right? So I guess, what do you think this whole fervor for a return to, like, these pagan religious traditions, why do you think there's so much fervor for that? Even,
Well,
given the
well,
fact that we know those religions are, they would have participated in probably a great deal of ritual violence, right? Ritual sacrifice, um, of children, women, and men, and captive war victims, right?
Well, we get back to this idea of the noble savage, that
Yeah.
became very popular in the Enlightenment,
Hmm.
and it became very popular, surprise, surprise, among French intellectuals,
Yeah.
at the time of the French Revolution. I
Yeah.
know that that's a mind bender for us, but um, they they have this notion that pagans and pre-Christian civilizations had almost a Christian sensibility about them,
Okay.
where they believe they may not have had a perfect concept of it, but they had this idea of universal dignity,
Hmm.
or maybe an emerging view of universal dignity that, maybe they didn't really fully understand it, but that they were just good civilized, people that just had different religious views
Hmm.
than you and I do, but they still had the same kind of civilized sensibility.
Hmm.
And I would argue that the origin of that line of thinking, and I don't want to offend our Protestant brothers and sisters,
Hmm.
but Martin Luther was really the one that came up with this whole idea of there being kind of a heavenly realm and a secular realm, you
Okay.
know,
Hmm.
and that's really where the idea of religion as being a component of a person's belief system, and
Hmm.
kind of a component of someone's kind of philosophy of the world, a component of the way that people think about themselves and the rest of reality, um begins,
Okay.
where you have this kind of like, well, you've got the spiritual side of reality, and then you've got the secular side of reality, and the two don't really have anything to do with one another.
Hmm. Hmm.
um prior to the Reformation, the way the Christian mind viewed everything as being infused with the infinitely spiritual,
Right.
you know?
So now,
Um
okay. With that though, would you say that because pagans? Okay.
here, so this is really important, is that they look back on the pagan world and they say, oh, pagans had an understanding of there being the religious part of themselves and the
Hmm.
religious part of reality and the secular.
Right.
And
Right.
that just like good enlightened
Hmm.
Europeans
Hmm.
of the 17th century,
Yeah.
we now realize that we can't intermingle those two worlds. Those are two separate spheres.
Hmm.
And of course, maybe they weren't aware of it, but they wouldn't intermingle those two spheres either, because they were good civilized people with Christian, with what we would call Christian sensibilities, but they just weren't aware cognitively of Christianity. They just had a different way of thinking.
Hmm.
And I think a big part of that is the unfortunate European disposition to make Christianity just a mental, there, especially Western Europe, a very mental thing, rather than it being a holistic thing.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense,
It
and
does.
that probably has to do with that, with Gnosticism, especially, uh, Gnosticism, unfortunately, still, the influence of Gnosticism remaining among the Germans, especially, and manifesting itself in German philosophies, the Hegelian dialectic, and Marx, and all that kind of crazy stuff.
Right.
But that's where I think a lot of this comes from, is that we have projected our sensibilities and what we expect out of society and civilization onto to the pre-Christian world,
Hmm.
when that's absurd to do. It's completely absurd.
Hmm. But do you think that like when you talked about Protestantism and you know the Germans, okay, um,
Mm-hmm.
would you, given that you know you would say that they're the ones that sort of
Friedrich
separate?
Nietzsche was German too.
Right, 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 right. Given that the Protestant world wanted to sort of separate the heavenly or the spiritual from
Yeah,
the temporal.
so it's traditionally called like two kingdoms way of viewing the world, rather than viewing the world as being one kingdom.
Okay, so so the fact that Protestants came up with this idea of the two kingdom worldview, do you think that that is why so many people have forgone Christianity and sought to return to sort of a pagan religious worldview because they see the pagan religious worldview as rejecting that separation. You see what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
people who in the West want to engage with Hare Krishna, and Hindus and all that, right? Um, you know, or people that really want to get into, Buddhism and meditation, or people that really want to get into, Islam, right? Or any other religion that is not Christianity, that the reason why they are leaning in the direction is because they see the sort of the Christian world has this. I mean, is the right word? Would you call it like dualism?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so they reject that. They reject that idea of dualism. They want to have a spiritual and religious encounter. They want to have some kind of encounter with the divine, and they see Christianity as being like a like almost like a Protestant work ethic type of thing. You know what I mean? It's just about putting your hand to the grinding stone and working for your community and building, from an economic point of view, and everything will be okay. If you just, do the Calvinist thing, like create this little town, this city
Mm-hmm.
where everything is sort of, you know, there's this world. Let's deal with the things that are here, and then like we don't have to talk about the spiritual world because that's already you're already destined to go somewhere. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're either going to hell or heaven. Like there's no so we don't need to talk about that. Let's just deal with the temporal material
Yeah,
world.
you're just biding your time here, really.
Yeah, you're just biding your time. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you think that's why a lot of people in the West have turned to these other religious traditions because they see Christianity as being way too almost like materialistic, or way too concerned with, or being way um too too religious, like they're too extreme or something like that? Does that make sense what I'm saying? I mean, I guess people are longing
Well,
for. Yeah.
so I think people understand innately that there's something completely absurd about a culture that's that on one end confesses itself to be Christian,
Hmm.
and then a culture on another end, on another end, that in the realm of entertainment um glorifies the occult,
Hmm.
glorifies witchcraft,
Hmm.
glorifies like the undead coming back to life.
Okay.
um that there's something just absurd
Hmm.
about a culture that says, I believe this, but I also believe this, and when the two are completely opposed to one another. And also too, another thing would be, I mentioned natural selection earlier. A
Hmm.
culture that teaches all of its children that they all evolved from animals, from that they all evolved from a common primate,
Hmm.
and the mechanism that drove that evolution from that common primate to the more complex sophisticated mammal that we are,
Hmm.
was the exploitation of the weak by the strong that
Hmm.
we call natural selection.
Hmm.
So the thing is, when you're teaching your children that, but you also expect them to be merciful. And the
Okay.
thing is, mercy and compassion and true authentic uh care for the victim is absurd if natural selection is true,
Hmm. Hmm. But
right?
okay, but
And the inverse is true also.
couldn't one say
but
that?
but but the
Yeah.
thing is, this only makes sense
mhm,
this only makes sense if you accept the notion of the secular,
mhm,
of the two kingdoms, right? Like
mhm,
that you have one half of yourself
mhm,
that's here and it's material and it's science and you enjoy, well, I'm going to put science in air quotes,
mhm,
science, and you cling to these relics like the Nebraska man and the Piltdown man and stuff that are known evolutionary frauds.
mhm.
Look them up.
Okay.
Um, then you and then whenever you want to be entertained, you go and watch a horror movie that's glorifying the occult and it's
Yeah.
glorifying witchcraft
Yeah.
and warlocks and all this other kind of stuff and zombies and
Mhm,
everything. These things that are wicked and inherently evil and are counter to the Christian faith.
mhm,
um but then you also say that you're a Christian too, so like you're, so what it does is it splits modernity really means to be split in half.
mhm. Okay.
That you've got this like heavenly or spiritual side of yourself where you would put like the like morality and ethics and the stuff that modernity would really say is not really all that important.
Mhm,
Then you've got the other half of yourself that's scientific. I come from a monkey,
mhm,
and the way that my ancestors evolved to this more complex form that I embody now
mhm,
is through exploiting and through exploitation and subjugation of the weak by the strong.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Okay. So then, what do you say to this then? Right? We've seen a lot of, we've seen a lot of sort of films and what seem to be like movies and series, a lot of these series that are coming out that to me seem like people are really interested in religious experience. You know what I mean? And so when you think about like entertainment, and movies, so I'm just thinking here, like right off the top of my head, like Doom. It's a movie,
Mm-hmm.
and it's too, and just made a new sort of popular break again. Um, and there's another series called Chaos, which is on Netflix that just came out with Jeff Goldblum, as Zeus and all
Oh,
the other.
you had mentioned that that's about like the Greek gods and goddesses, but
Yeah,
told in modern times or whatever.
told in modern times, and the fact that like the gods are in recognition almost that humans do not like them, and humans do not want to worship them, but because of their fear of them, they do it. They will
Mm,
sacrifice, or they will whatever, because they don't want to um reap the wrath of the gods, right? um you know so in other words, I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of entertainment that is coming out now that people sort of seem to long for these myths and these ideas about the metaphysical, world, or the world that's beyond our, sensible reality or whatever, right? And I just can't help but think that the reason for that longing is because the West has been really deprived of um its religious that the religious experience, that religious experience, say under Christianity.
mhm.
Now I don't know where that started, or you know where that break happened. Like, why did people, I mean, I guess you would argue that it started with Protestantism. It started with the Enlightenment, right?
And largely the Enlightenment, because honestly, I don't think Luther realized what the implications of his theology were going to end up being.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it was really the Enlightenment thinkers that really hashed it out, and
Hmm.
said there are two worlds.
Hmm.
There's the heavenly world that doesn't have anything to do with the earthly world, and there's an
Hmm.
earthly world that doesn't have anything to do with the heavenly world. And in a way, what they did was they changed the very way that humans view themselves and the way that humans understand themselves, because humans used to understand themselves as being one holistic person, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now we have made it so that humans understand themselves to be fractured and fractured and fragmented, departmentalized creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a recipe for mental illness.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, and that's something that the early psychologists recognized was, when you repress something, you get more of it.
Mm-hmm.
When you repress, um, when you tell somebody don't drink, don't
Mm-hmm.
drink, don't drink, you can't drink,
Mm-hmm.
drinking is taboo, you're prohibited from drinking, all this stuff. What does it make people want to do? It makes people want to drink more, right? Like, and Freud would argue that with the libido, that in the Victorian period, which I don't want to get into that, but I think Freud was just a maniac, um but the fact is, when you suppress something, you end up getting more of it. And I think because we suppress, the modern man is so suppressed spiritually,
Mm-hmm.
so and has been so suppressed spiritually for so long. And I think that after World War II, we had this atheistic materialist consensus on
Mm-hmm.
reality that set in. And I think now that everybody from that time period is pretty much dead,
Mm-hmm.
um I think that consensus is being called into question.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because people are not well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This whole thing, it's backfired on itself.
Right.
But ironically, because the modern man views religion as being optional,
Mm-hmm.
what it has done is it has given modern man the green light to really take on whatever religion he wants.
Right. 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 So for
And
me,
so
yeah,
so
I
so
guess.
he might optionally take on a religion that makes a statement about reality that says reality is one. It's not
Right.
it's not split.
Right, right, right. So in other words, they're adamantly looking for the religion that tells them that there is a spiritual world, and it actually
Yeah.
has a lot to do with the world that you're living in, the material world, or the natural world that we're living in, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why so many of us in the West, whether you want to say it's the girl that chooses voodoo or Hinduism, or it's the boy that chooses Islam, or you know, I don't know, some
Or
other.
Catholicism or orthodoxy,
Yeah, I mean, I guess the
because
reason why I didn't incorporate those two was because I think a lot of people in the West have this sort of automatic, visceral, disdain for Christianity. But
but but
yeah, I
but
do I do I
they
do
make a
believe that.
state
Yeah,
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 but they make a statement about the world that reality is one,
right, right, right,
and that you
yeah,
are one person and that you cannot split yourself.
right.
And also too, I think that when you look at um so Protestantism is not a monolith.
Mhm,
There are a lot of parts of it.
mhm,
When you look at like the charismatics, and when you look at the Pentecostals, and you look at those people, many of them do not view the world as being split, as being fractured and split into two.
mhm,
They're kind of somewhere in the middle.
mhm,
But in many ways, I think that their denominations are the result of a movement away from the the partitioning of reality into the secular and the religious.
mhm,
But but I don't think they would put it in those terms. And
mhm.
because the thing is, when you talk to Pentecostals, for instance, and people that are more charismatic, they recognize that miracles happen. You
Right.
know,
Mhm.
they they recognize that there's a spiritual warfare happening.
Right.
They recognize that angels and demons are fighting all around you and fighting for your soul. You know,
Right.
um, Calvinists, on the other hand, would either not acknowledge that, or they would just say that's not super important.
Right. 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 Okay. So I guess to sort of close out with this, maybe we can kind of return to, um, you know, what do you think in the end it will be the result, right? Like we from a Christian perspective, you know, Christians are going to say that Christ is going to be victorious in the end, right? He's going to
Mhm.
be victorious over sin and death, right? And that Christians are very much aware of, um, the epistle of Paul, I think in the book of Ephesians, where he talks about not wrestling with
With
the
flesh and
flesh,
blood
flesh and blood, yeah, but with principalities
and powers.
and powers, yeah.
Yep.
Um, and so, um, you know, in the end, I mean, Christians, we are aware of that. We understand that, and so I guess I'm just trying to leave off with sort of a good note. Knowing that, okay, like, yeah, maybe we are sort of advancing towards a much more pagan worldview, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't want to lean into something like what Elon Musk was saying, and that is, unless Christians start speaking out more, then Christianity is finished. You see what I'm saying? Because I don't necessarily believe that. I think Christianity and Christus Victor is the ultimate reality,
Mhm.
right? That is the thing that will happen, you know, regardless of human agency or not, regardless if we participate in that or not. And some might say, well, some might argue that, well, then this is a fixed fight. Why are we even fighting this fight? You know what I mean? If Christ is going to still be victorious, but I guess it's a way of giving us the chance to participate in that
Mhm.
in that.
Well, and it's essential that we participate in it,
Yeah,
because God is all powerful,
yeah.
but God has chosen, or God has decided that we are to play a role in
Hmm.
the salvation of in the salvation of the world.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not that we're the source of it by any, because we're definitely not. If we were relying on you or me to be the salvation of the world, then the world would be in big trouble, right? But
Yeah. Don't
but
count it.
but but the thing is, we are to be his foot soldiers, in a sense.
Right.
And what an incredible thing that we have the opportunity to participate, that God chooses for us to participate.
Hmm. 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 Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. Hmm.
I guess the thing I would say is that I think humans fundamentally understand that there is only one reality.
Hmm.
That reality is not partitioned into these different neat and tidy segments,
Yeah.
and
Categories.
departments. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, categories, that there are categories that exist in reality,
Yeah.
but you're not excluding things until into their own little partitions.
Right. Right.
And so I think what'll probably end up happening, if the West continues on its path to being repaganized,
Yeah.
um, the therapist will probably replace the priest.
Hmm. Hmm.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So the therapist might be the one to do the sacrifice, or to tell you what sacrifice to make.
Wow.
I mean, maybe, because this is the thing:
Hmm.
the role that the church used to that the church would play in the lives of people, um it has been replaced by modern psychology, in a
Mm.
way.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
And somebody who I have, um whose works I've personally read a lot of, Carl Jung,
Mhm.
who's a pretty inflammatory figure. I've noticed people either love him or they hate him,
Right.
and I'm kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff that I've mentioned, Jung was very much aware of,
Hmm.
and Jung would argue, in a way that made me that makes me believe that he was very remorseful of this fact
Mm,
that 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 he was a modern shaman, and
mm,
that the
mm,
modern psychologist that the modern day psychologist is modern man's shaman.
mm. And
You
he
know,
said that himself? He thought that himself?
yes,
Wow.
yes.
Okay.
And so what Jung would argue, and Jung would argue that psychology is really it's a very Western thing, because what he would argue is that the people who understand reality to be one, they're not having to reconcile they're not having to reconcile fragmented parts of their self.
Mhm, mhm.
That 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 the fragmentation never happened for them.
Okay. Mhm, mhm.
So for whatever issues they were facing, they would go to a shaman for it,
Right.
you know.
Right, right, right.
um and so but Jung would argue that at the end of one's life,
Mhm,
that that basically all these broken fragmented parts of your mind would be reunified as one.
mm, mhm, mhm,
And that's what he would argue the goal of the modern psychologist should be,
mm,
is to reunify man's mind, and in a mystical way that's reunifying, that's doing everything that a human can do to help reunify the soul. But
mm,
the thing that he would always argue, he would always tell people, go back to your faith tradition.
mhm, mhm.
If you were a Jew, he would tell you, go back to the synagogue. If you're a Muslim, he would say you need to go to the what's the Muslim
The mosque.
the mosque. He would
Mhm,
say, go back to the mosque. You're a Christian, he would say, go back to church. You're a
mhm,
Hindu, he would say, go to your temple.
mhm,
Um, so and there are a lot of conclusions that Jung made I don't agree with, but
mhm.
as far as a diagnosis of the problem, I think Jung was pretty spot on.
Yeah. He would say something like, "Just go to church."
Yeah, yeah, and that's something Jung would say, is that
Yeah.
that the goal of the therapist would be to get to the person to the point where they're no longer having to go to therapy.
Right, right,
You know,
which is, I think, the way it ought to be. Like,
but unfortunately, I think, and I'm not saying this for all therapists, but I think in a lot of ways, a lot of therapy has become it's become a big grift and a big money train.
yeah.
The way the atheist views the Christian clergyman is the way that I kind of view a lot of psychologists.
Mm,
Not and not all of them, because there are a lot of them, there are a lot of them that I know that
yeah,
are, they're genuinely good people that are wanting to help other people.
yeah.
That but there are a lot of like the pop psychologists that have written a lot of books and stuff, and they
Mhm,
go and do like, they charge like $20,000 to go and to do like a 25-minute keynote speech or something.
mhm.
Those people are just grifting. You know,
Well, we won't name no names, but
no,
I'm sure we have a few in the back of our in the
yeah,
back of our head.
yeah. But so
Yeah.
I guess to kind of tie everything together, I think the reason that the repaganizing of the West has become almost an inevitable thing is that modern man's mind and soul is so fragmented.
Mhm,
We're
mhm,
so fragmented, I guess, cognitively,
mhm.
and we're smart enough to understand, and also to intuitively know this is unhealthy and this is harming me.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of the people that go to therapy are going there without realizing it. They're going there because they want to reunify themselves.
Mhm.
They want to stop being compartmentalized. They want to be one, as they know they ought to be, right?
Yes.
And um and the thing is, unfortunately, modern therapy, it's not going to help reunify you. But I
Mhm.
think what's so attractive to people um about paganism, and
Mhm.
also too about traditional forms of Christianity,
Mhm.
is that it articulates that reality is one, and
Mhm.
that God made you to be one.
Yes, yes. And another thing that you know, don't quote me on this, but I'll just say from my perspective, um, is that I think people also want to they are they are attracted to a faith system that holds them accountable for what they do wrong, but doesn't make it like a self-righteous thing.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like they want to know that what they believe is order. It has order, and it has and it's right, right, and it's justified, and that it makes sense to turn away from certain things, vices and sins and all of that, which we all have. Okay,
Yeah.
me included. All right, but I think what people also enjoy maybe about traditional religions and also forms of orthodoxy with Orthodox Christianity, you know um, that includes Catholicism,
Hmm.
um, is that what they you know it doesn't approach the vices and the sins from a perspective of um like you'll never get it right, right? You'll never, you are a like you are a sinner saved by grace. That is the only, you know what I mean? Like, and you must do this, you must live a holy and righteous life right now. You know what I'm saying? I want you to, you
Hmm.
know, receive, Jesus, and turn away from your wicked ways. You know what I'm saying? And I think, because when we were kids, that's what you heard on television. A lot of
Hmm.
times it was like, what do they call it? Like fire and brimstone preaching. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? You don't
Yeah.
live right, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
So and so what I think people want is they want to grow in their faith. They don't want
Yeah.
to just like, you know, it's not that they don't want to, it's that it's hard to turn away from sin.
Yeah.
Okay. It's hard to turn away from your vices. It's hard to turn away from the things that you have turned into habits.
Hmm.
Okay. And I think that especially with like Christianity in an orthodox perspective, I think those tr- traditions within Christianity are much more aware of
Hmm.
that it's a road that you kind of have to travel. You know what I mean? It's a work on your life that you have to do daily. You know, being aware of the fact that you will have stumbling blocks, right? You will encounter, you know, deep challenges to your faith and to your beliefs, and you'll have doubt, and you will struggle. But I think the difference is that Christians are aware of the fact that it's not something that has to be cyclical and continue,
Right.
but that you can actually break free from it and be delivered, but that comes through time and effort, right, and a willingness to have humility, and be aware of the fact that you won't always get it right. You know what I mean? You aren't Christ. you know you're trying to be more like him, right? And so I think that is the sort of maybe the way in which Christians have to communicate that, is that you know like you know we're not Christians shouldn't try to tell people that, like, you just got to be like a Puritan.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? You know um you know don't associate yourself with anybody that's not a Christian, or something like that. You know what I mean? Just we're going to stay pious and in this group, and we're not going to interact with the world. We're not going to dialogue with the world. We need to escape the world. The world is evil.
Then you become Amish.
You come Amish, you know what I mean? Or
Well,
some
and you
like,
see that the
yeah.
Amish are super two kingdoms, right? Like
Okay.
the Amish they separate themselves off from everybody because what they yeah they view this world as just being but this is the thing is I think I've said this before, and I don't remember who said this, but
Mhm.
most heresies in Christian history are saying that it's one thing exclusively instead of saying both and.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because there is a way of looking at things that it's one kingdom and two kingdoms,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
but when you exclusively say it's only one and not the other,
Mhm.
then you end up with a problem.
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Well, I suppose that, I mean, Christians are aware of, what does Jesus say? He said the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak,
Yeah.
and
Is it
you know.
ever?
but we, but hey, that's another thing that Christians like. I really do, and I've never really expressed, stuff like that, but I really do find comfort in in knowing that God is merciful, and his grace is there all the time. You know what I mean? He's often,
Hmm.
what does it say? He says he's slow to anger, and and what is it? He's slow to anger and full of mercy, or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, you know, uh, these other gods that existed were not like that. You know what I mean? If they
Hmm.
if when they order something, they wanted something. And this takes me back to the other thing. See, people think that, like, in the biblical times, you talk about the ancients and the Israelites and even Christians, in the time of when Rome was ruling over Jerusalem, or Jerusalem was a client state to Rome. Okay, want to get technical with it. Um, no one would have rejected the fact that the other gods existed. You know, no one would have rejected that other gods existed, but Christianity would have said they exist, but they're demons. They're demonic forces.
And they were, and they
Yeah,
are.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, that's the way I tend to look at it. Not like, oh, they're just idols that don't have any uh being,
Right.
or force, or power. I think they do. And you
Yeah,
know,
there are powerful beings behind them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But Christ is victorious in the end, right? That's
Amen.
that's the main thing. So, all right, brother. It's good talking to you, man.
All right, peace.
Yeah, yeah. Let's do it again.